In the shadows of England's most famous kings and queens lies the quiet force that ended a civil war, united two rival houses, and gave birth to a dynasty that would shape the future of Britain. She never led armies, she never seized power, but without her, there would be no Tudor Rose. This is the story of Elizabeth of York, the queen history tried to forget, but the crown could never afford to lose. Join me, History with Amy, as I uncover the extraordinary story of the White Rose of York, the Queen who truly united England and laid the foundations for the glorious Tudor age. Born on the 11th of February 1466 at Westminster Palace, Elizabeth was the eldest child of King Edward IV and his controversial queen, Elizabeth Woodville. Her parents' marriage was a scandal, a king marrying a commoner widow, but it produced a large, vibrant family. Elizabeth was raised as a princess of England, destined for a prestigious European marriage alliance. Her early years were spent in the luxury and relative peace of her father's court, during a period when the Yorkist grip on the throne seemed secure. She would have received an education befitting her status, learning French, Latin, and the courtly arts. She would be the eldest of the 10 children born to her mother Elizabeth Woodville, 7 daughters, and 3 sons. It was a large family. However, the shadow of the Wars of the Roses was never far away. Her father, Edward IV, had seized the throne from the Lancastrian King Henry VI. Despite periods of peace, the dynastic rivalry simmered beneath the surface. Elizabeth lived a privileged life, but one inherently marked by the precariousness of power in 15th century England. She was a symbol of Yorkist triumph, a direct heir to the newly established dynasty, and her future was inextricably linked to the survival of her family's rule. As the eldest daughter, Elizabeth's future marriage was of the utmost importance. In 1469, aged just 3, she was briefly betrothed to George Neville, who was created the Duke of Bedford in anticipation of this marriage, but that was later called off. Then, in 1475, when she was 9 years old, she was betrothed to King Louis XI's eldest son, Charles, the Dauphin of France. In 1482, however, Louis decided against this match and everything fell through. Nonetheless, in 1477, at the age of 11, Elizabeth was named a Lady of the Garter, along with her mother and her paternal aunt, Elizabeth of York, Duchess of Suffolk. This was a great mark of respect, and it signalled her as a future great bride. Everyone knew that she would eventually make a grand match. Tragedy, however, struck with brutal swiftness in April of 1483. Her father died unexpectedly, leaving Elizabeth's younger brother, the 12-year-old Edward V, as the new king. However, the path to the throne was anything but smooth. Her uncle, Richard, the Duke of Gloucester, was appointed Lord Protector. And what followed remains one of history's most enduring mysteries. Elizabeth, her siblings, and her mother sought sanctuary in Westminster Abbey, a desperate attempt to protect themselves from the unfolding political machinations. Within weeks, Parliament had declared her parents' marriage invalid, rendering Elizabeth and her siblings illegitimate. This act stripped her of her royal status and declared her uncle Richard the rightful king. He was crowned Richard III in July of 1483. Even more horrifying was the fate of her younger brothers, the princes in the Tower, Edward V and Richard, Duke of York. They were confined to the Tower of London, and they vanished shortly thereafter, never to be seen again. Elizabeth's world, once secure and privileged, was completely shattered. She was now a stigmatized figure, her legitimacy was questioned, her brothers were lost, and her family's reign overthrown. And all of this caused by her uncle. This period of profound uncertainty and grief would forever shape her character. In the face of such devastating loss, her mother, Elizabeth Woodville, made a desperate and audacious alliance. From her sanctuary, she entered into a secret pact with none other than Lady Margaret Beaufort, the staunch Lancastrian matriarch whose only son Henry Tudor was in exile in Brittany. These two women, once bitter enemies, were united by their shared desire to see Richard III overthrown and a desire to protect their remaining children. Their plan was daring. Henry Tudor would invade England, depose Richard III, and crucially, marry Elizabeth of York. This betrothal, announced in Christmas of 1483, was the ultimate strategic move because it would merge the warring houses of Lancaster and York, providing a legitimate claim through Elizabeth's royal blood and offering a promise of stability and an end to the brutal War of the Roses. For Elizabeth, this was not a love match, but a political imperative. Her personal happiness was secondary to the nation's healing. She was, once again, a pawn in a high-stakes game. In March of 1484, Elizabeth Woodville and her daughters were persuaded, according to the Crowland Chronicle, to withdraw from sanctuary under, quote, frequent intercessions and dire threats. Richard III additionally swore a public oath promising that they would not suffer any manner hurt, nor would he imprison them within the Tower of London or other prison. At this time, it was rumoured that Richard III actually intended to marry his young niece, Elizabeth of York, because his wife Anne Neville was dying and they had no surviving children. Soon after Anne Neville's death, though, Richard III sent Elizabeth away from court to Sheriff Hutton Castle, and he then opened negotiations with King John II of Portugal to marry his sister Joan, Princess of Portugal. And he also decided to try and have Elizabeth marry their cousin, the future King Manuel of Portugal. Meanwhile, Henry Tudor was preparing to return to England, and on the 22nd of August 1485, Henry Tudor met Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth Field. In a decisive victory, Richard III was killed and Henry Tudor was crowned King Henry VII on the battlefield. With the Yorkist king dead, the path was now clear for the promised union. Despite concerns among some Lancastrians, Henry VII was true to his word, and on the 18th of January 1486 at Westminster Abbey, he married Elizabeth of York, the Yorkist heiress. This was no ordinary wedding. It was a symbolic bedrock of a new dynasty. The public, weary of decades of strife, celebrated the union with immense relief and hope. The blending of the red rose of Lancaster and the white rose of York into the new Tudor Rose became the potent emblem of a reunited England. Elizabeth was crowned Queen Consort on the 25th of November 1487 at Westminster Abbey. This coronation was delayed, a deliberate move by Henry to ensure that his own claim to the throne was firmly established by conquest and not through his wife's superior hereditary right. Nevertheless, the ceremony was magnificent, cementing her status in the eyes of the people as their rightful queen. Elizabeth's most vital contribution to the fledgling Tudor dynasty was the secure and swift provision of her heirs. Within months of their marriage, on September the 20th, she gave birth to their first child, a son, Prince Arthur, at Winchester. This was a moment of immense relief and jubilation. Arthur's birth, named after the legendary king, symbolised the dawn of a new, glorious era for England. His very existence, uniting both houses of York and Lancaster, was the ultimate legitimisation of the Tudor claim. Elizabeth proved to be a fertile queen. I don't like using that word, but she was, bearing Henry VII 7 children in total, though not all survived infancy. Her successful pregnancies were critical for the dynasty's stability. After Arthur, she bore Princess Margaret, who would eventually marry King James IV of Scotland, establishing the royal line that would eventually lead to the Stuart kings of England. Then came Prince Henry, the future Henry VIII, a strong second son, and later Princess Mary, who would briefly be the Queen of France. Despite their marriage being a political arrangement, records indicate that both partners appear to have slowly fallen in love with each other. It was actually a marriage of respect and affection. And Thomas Penn, in his biography of Henry VII, writes that, quote, "Though founded on pragmatism, Henry and Elizabeth's marriage had nevertheless blossomed throughout the uncertainty and upheaval of the previous 18 years. This was a marriage of faithful love, of mutual attraction, affection, and respect, from which the king seems to have drawn great strength." As Queen, Elizabeth played a significant role in court life, maintaining a magnificent household and fostering a reputation for kindness, charity, and quiet dignity. She was admired by her husband's court and, importantly, by the common people. Her presence brought a sense of calm and respectability to the new dynasty, helping to reconcile former Yorkist loyalists to the new regime. As Queen, Elizabeth made arrangements for the education of her younger children, including the future Henry VIII. She also accompanied her husband on his diplomatic visit to Calais in 1500 to meet Philip I of Castile. And when organising the marriage of Prince Arthur to Catherine of Aragon, she corresponded with Queen Isabella I of Castile. Elizabeth was a very pious woman, and one of her life passions was charity. She apparently gave away money and alms in very large quantities, to the point that she actually indebted herself on many occasions. She also had a love of books and even patronised the English printer William Caxton. She enjoyed music, dancing, and gambling, and she also kept greyhounds. She was the perfect Tudor lady. The stability that Elizabeth brought to the dynasty was cruelly tested in 1502. Her beloved eldest son, Prince Arthur, a young man of great promise and married to Catherine of Aragon, died suddenly at Ludlow Castle on the 2nd of April 1502, likely from the sweating sickness. He was just 15 years old. This was a crushing blow, not only for Elizabeth and Henry VII as grieving parents, but for the entire kingdom, as the painstakingly secured succession was now thrown into doubt. Accounts suggest that Henry VII struggled profoundly with his grief, and it was Elizabeth, despite her own deep sorrow, who found the strength to comfort him. She is famously recorded as saying, "God has left us yet a fair prince and two fair princesses," referring to the future Henry VIII, Margaret and Mary. This moment encapsulates her resilience and her unwavering focus on dynastic duty, even in the face of immense personal loss. The death of Prince Arthur meant that Prince Henry, now only 10 years old, became the heir apparent. Elizabeth's efforts in raising him and her own children now took on an even greater importance, securing the future of the Tudor line through her surviving offspring. However, just a year after Arthur's death, tragedy struck again. Queen Elizabeth of York died on her 37th birthday, February the 11th, 1503, at the Tower of London following childbirth. Her infant daughter Catherine, who had been born on the 2nd of February, had also died shortly after. Henry VII, famously reserved, was said to be absolutely devastated by her death, retreating into solitude and mourning deeply for the woman who had brought peace and legitimacy to his reign. Elizabeth of York's life was one of immense transition. Born a Yorkist princess, she became a Lancastrian queen, and through her children, the matriarch of the Tudor dynasty. She navigated extreme personal upheaval, from princess to illegitimate outcast, from a sister of lost princes to a queen who united a nation. Her quiet strength, her role as a loving mother, and her unwavering commitment to her dynastic duty ensured the peaceful succession and the flourishing of the Tudor line. Though often overshadowed by the powerful men in her life, Elizabeth of York was the essential bridge between the two warring eras. Her legacy lives on not just in the stability she brought to England, but in the very existence of the Tudor dynasty itself. A dynasty that would produce some of England's most famous monarchs. I think that Elizabeth of York embodies a powerful lesson in history. That influence isn't always loud or confrontational. Sometimes it is the quiet, steadfast resilience, the strength and duty, and the ability to embrace one's role for the greater good that truly shapes a nation. Elizabeth was the calm at the heart of the storm, the mother who secured the future, and the queen who, perhaps more than any other, lived up to the symbolic promise of her name, truly uniting England. Her story reminds us that behind every grand narrative of kings and battles, there are often powerful, enduring women whose contributions are equally, if not more, profound. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of Elizabeth of York. If you found this journey into her life interesting, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more stories of the figures who shaped our world. And of course, if you have any suggestions, please write them down in the comments because I'm always looking for ideas.